Play at Novabet.
Hello and a warm welcome to this week's edition of the Irish Angle in association with Novabet. As usual, Emma, Nagle and Johnny Ward are here and we're going to discuss all the things happening in racing both here and abroad. Emma, Johnny, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Vinny?
Thanks, Vincent.
Now, start off with, there was tragic news last week about John Hunt and his family. Terrible thing, racing commentator in the UK. I just see, without going into too much on it, I suppose, but I see that one of his friends, Matt Chapman, has set up a GoFundMe page. Basically, the money is to help his surviving daughter, Amy, so that she doesn't have to worry about going back to work or whatever she may want to do in future. So I see this morning, there's 28,000 already raised. I'd say the numbers will go through the roof on this because it's obviously really had a big impact on the racing community. Well, what did you make of that, Johnny?
Yeah, there's some things happen in life that you can't put words to, and this is one of those incidences. It's been a staggeringly sad event. I didn't know John Hunt. I don't know John Hunt that well, but he's my favorite commentator. Pretty much, just love his style of commentary, and I think he's very gets the quality of the race right. And I met him a couple of times, and you got a very warm impression of him. But I was talking to some of my colleagues in racing TV, who would have known him better, and they were devastated. And I mean, the messages I was getting in relation to, if one person in the world did not deserve this, it was John Hunt. And Richard Hoyle's tribute on ITV I was very, very close to tears during it, because he was talking about how when John would go to they had some event, and afterwards they go for a few beers in the local, and he'd always take out photos of his daughters. And not a lot of dads wouldn't be inclined to do that, but he was obviously besotted with them, and it's absolutely tragic beyond words. He's but the tributes that were put across about John Hunt, really meant something. And it was a sad week because David Power passed away, and that obviously, but that you're talking about scale here. David Power was 77 and he'd been sick, but there was a genuine outpouring of real sympathy for him as well. And I didn't know David Power that well, but you could definitely tell that the same thing was said about him. Gentleman, absolute old school, really, really good guy and very helpful and all of that. And then the John Hunt story obviously broke. So it was a devastating week for racing, but I've really, it's like Emma kind of put it there, it's very, very hard to put into words a situation like this. The Donald Trump incident, for example, it's kind of brought the focus again on America's gun laws and all of that. But this incident in England is just so off the wall that I don't even know what you can say about it.
Yeah, I know as a father myself with two daughters, well, everybody sympathizes, but I just know myself. I have two daughters of very similar ages to his poor children who died. And with boyfriends, the two girls down the years have had different boyfriends that they've broken up from, and there's always a bloody issue after it. There's always a bit of baggage afterwards with fellas ringing, texting, trying to get back with them and everything else, but you never dream it's going to end in the way it did for poor John Hunt's family. Anyway, look, moving on from that, Luke Comer, he starts his 3-year suspension of his trainer's license today, and there's no word of him passing the baton over to anyone else, either his son or Jim Gorman, who's the assistant trainer. And I see there was a piece yesterday, Emma, in the Business Post, which says he's seriously thinking about leaving the sport.
Yeah, it's a really weird situation, I suppose. I think you mentioned earlier that he's one of the top trainers in Ireland, I suppose, with numbers of runners. He had over 80 individual horses run already this year, which is a massive amount of horses. If the license isn't going to be passed to someone else, what is he going to do with them? Is he going to sell them? It's strange because, it's kind of just becomes the norm, I suppose. Now when a trainer becomes banned, the license will pass on to maybe their assistant or a family member. But yeah, reading the piece in the Times, it was pretty eye-opening. I think he said he spent 6 million on trying to prove himself innocent in the case, and he's puts up to 50 million a year into the horse racing industry, which, it's kind of mind-blowing figures, and trying to defend his innocence. But I think we've kind of mentioned it on the show before, like a a person like Luke Comer, while it's a massive loss if he does decide to leave racing, it's probably not someone who should hold a trainer's license at the same time, because he's only in the country for a certain amount of period of the year. He can't know everything that's going on in the yard. So even though he has put massive money into defending the whole case, and that, it's pretty mind blowing, the fact that he was granted the license in the first place. I'd imagine you'd think that anyone with a license would have to be in the yard for the majority of the year, nearly every day of the week, for most trainers. But it's a really bizarre situation. It sounds like he's kind of fed up with racing in a way. But I'd encourage anyone to read the article, because the money he seems to have put into racing in the last few years, I think since 2016, they've put over 80 million into the company in relating to bloodstock. So yeah, it's pretty mind blowing. And he kind of notes in it as well that he came into racing just as a passion. He wasn't expecting to get anything back out of it. Kind of seems to be the way in which the yard is run. But yeah, it's just a bizarre situation in the whole place, really. The whole operation. But yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen to all the horses now. You'd imagine someone's going to take over the license there, because there's obviously a lot of horses in training.
Jeez, you wouldn't fancy doing it from a commercial point of view, would you? Like, look, he's the fourth biggest flat trainer in Ireland numerically, as we said, with the amount of horses. He's only behind Aidan, Joseph and Jessica Harrington in the number of horses he's run so far this season. And we saw in the last week or two, he's had a huge amount of runners, 4 and 5 runners in an awful lot of races as well. The other thing here, Johnny, like, the numbers are astounding here. He's spending 15 million a year on racing. That's 20% of what the government sticks into the industry here. So, like, it's a major end of the industry here that's going to just disappear potentially in the next few days.
Yeah, it's good, wide ranging stuff in the Business Post with Killian Woods, very good journalist, and I've done a couple of interviews with Luke. He's a unique enough character. Real rags to riches story. Basically, he came from practically nothing in like a few miles down the road from where I'm from, and himself and his brother, they just worked their asses off really night, noon, and morning, and gradually built up a property empire. And he has the ability to invest in horses, and an ability that like almost unrivaled. Really, you'd have a few comparisons with, maybe Coolmore and Arab money, but like the money he has, he's reputedly, they're billionaires, so he's able to put all this money into that legal case, which for me was, in terms of how money could be spent in the world and doing good, like the money that went to lawyers for this really crazy case was, that's maybe for another day, but the amount of money he's talking about, with 6 million, defending himself, getting scientists from all over the world, and he says, I can assure you, no Comer doped any horse. And now that's his word, but I would actually completely believe on that. But if you're a trainer who's not in the country for 9 months of the year, like, you can't account for everything that goes on in the yard, and you can't. I'm sure there's a fair old turnover of staff, and it wouldn't be 1,000,000 to 1 that some rogue member of staff with a gripe did something. It was so systematic that that's kind of what I would suggest happens. I'd say it was a rogue element, but I completely believe when he said he'd nothing to do with it, and I don't think he tries to advance his racing interests by doping at all. Now he's a strange operation, because like the stallions he uses are, they're left field, but the money he's been putting in is staggering, and it would be a fair loss to racing, and it'd be a fair loss to a lot of the jockeys. And in fairness to Jim Gorman and the lad working in the yard, like the horses they're actually, like, they've developed a reasonable level of consistency. A lot of them aren't much good, but they have been in reasonable form, and it's worth looking at the interview. He's obviously fed up with racing, but at the same time, I don't exactly see what the authorities could have done here, because it was a very, very serious breach.
Oh, absolutely. The most serious ever is the bottom line. So there had to be some sanctions here. There's no doubt about that. But look, we'll see where it all lies in the next few weeks, because we don't know at the moment. But as I say, where the horses will all end up is the thing, as Emma said, but we'll see what happens over the coming days. Another one here to look back on from last week is Donal O'Shea. He was the Chief Financial Officer with the IHRB. If you remember, about a year ago, they went into the Public Accounts Committee, and their CEO, Darragh O'Loughlin, said there'd been a matter of grave concern, couldn't tell anyone about it and everything else. And he told us at the time that Donal O'Shea was gone on voluntary leave and gave us no more information. It turns out, we found out recently that voluntary leave was actually paid leave. He was on a full salary for the year. And then recently, because there was a Mazars independent report being done on their accounts of the IHRB, and recently they were given a draft copy of that within the IHRB, and within days or hours of that, I don't know how long, but the bottom line is that Donal O'Shea then tenders his resignation, and he's gone. I find this very odd. The whole thing here is very odd. The other thing I found very strange about it was that, considering this is such a high-profile incident within the industry, and as they said themselves, a matter of grave concern, they don't think of telling anyone that he's gone. It was found out by some inside information someone got in the journal.ie, and they rang the IHRB to ask them, was it true he was gone? They said, yes, he's gone, and all of a sudden it's made public, but they had no intention of telling anyone by all accounts. There should have been a press release on this. What do you make of this, Johnny?
Yeah, it is a bit strange. Like, I mean, you're obviously wary of what you're saying here, but I'm wary of what I'm saying, because I understand vaguely what happened in the sense of the matter of grave concern, but we're left with a lot of questions here, because Donal, who by all accounts is a pretty quiet guy, he wouldn't be one to be given interviews or anything like that. But this, I mean, you'd imagine a press release probably should have been issued, because this is a really, really important matter, and it was hanging over the IHRB for a long, long time, and very difficult for Darragh O'Loughlin to deal with. And I feel initially he did the only thing that he could have done. He acted in the right way in the sense of what he told the Oireachtas here in that time. But now it's a bit of a cloud as to what actually happened. And obviously Donal's gone off into the sunset, so you're left with a lot of questions. But as you say, Vince, I think there should have been a press release anyway, and the incumbent now will inherit a situation that's obviously a bit a bit unique, and things have been a bit strained because of this, and it took a long time to figure out what happened. And my understanding there is that those looking into it weren't helped by everyone that really should have helped them. So we shall see, but it's not really a satisfactory set of affairs.
No, there will eventually be, we presume, we will get a report from Mazars that will be made public, and will shed some light on what the hell was going on here with the money transfer from the charity across to the IHRB and then back to the charity. All happened in 2022. Anyway, moving back a little bit, or on a little bit, whichever way you want to look at it. Newmarket last week with some cracking racing and some good Irish winners. Whistlejacket, Portaventura. What did you make of those, Emma?
Yeah, Whistlejacket, I was really impressed by him, and I'd start off with, I suppose he kind of disappointed in the Norfolk at Ascot, but stepping up to the 6 furlongs, whether it was that now or whether it was the bit more of a cut in the ground, I suppose they got a bit of rain at Newmarket, and I think a lot of the Irish trainers kind of seemed to think that there was a kind of few underperformances from the 2-year-olds at Ascot, but the ground was kind of rattling hard, kind of compared to what they had over here. So whether it was a step up and trip or whether it was the cut, but he looked to take a massive step forward from Ascot anyway, regardless. And the kind of market spoke for him a bit as well, I suppose. There was a lot of money for him at Ascot, but they backed him heavily again at Newmarket. Obviously, full brother of Little Big Bear, but they're totally different kind of specimens. They look nothing alike, but he was obviously champion 2-year-old. I don't think Whistlejacket maybe is as good as the brother, but he looked pretty quick there, and Ryan Moore seemed to be impressed by him as well. And Port Fortuna, she's been kind of a revelation this season, I think, hasn't she, for Donegal? She's probably been the standout 3-year-old filly, I suppose. And I think the kind of long-term target again is back to the Breeders' Cup, maybe to take on the boys that time, but she's been really, really good. I think she's come forward from 1 to 1. And, Donegal O'Brien, she's kind of the flag bearer for the stable, I suppose. He's had 6 Group 1 winners, I think, but I think she's won 3 of them. So she's a fair filly now. And maybe she had been a bit underestimated at the start of the year, but she's kind of going from strength to strength here. She beat a pretty quality field, I think, at Newmarket, and proves she definitely stays the mile as well.
And what do you think about this, Johnny? Porta Fortuna, like she's a flag bearer, as Emma's saying, for Donegal O'Brien. He seems to have a very small yard, doesn't he, in comparison to his brother Joseph, who has more horses in training than Luke Comer. So, he's having a hell of a season, isn't he? He'd probably have a better season than his brother this year, by the look of it.
His last 6 runners: winner, third, ninth, winner, including Port Fortuna and including the Naval Force, who was very good in a good race at Navan on Saturday. So this season, he's 10 from 58. It's a very good strike rate. Now, there are a couple of things here. Obviously, Donegal was given good horses, which is most trainers essentially wouldn't have that look that he's had. He's been given good owners and good horses at a very early age as a trainer, but he's totally different to Joseph as characters. Like I wouldn't imagine Donncha, and I'm completely speculating here, but I don't think he has the hunger to not so much the hunger, but I don't think he wants to have that level of horses like that Joseph has. If you go to the yard, small enough staff, it's very it's kind of quite tight knit, and I'd say he loves the way he's training at the moment. And like in relation to Porta Fortuna, I'd have some sympathy here for Gavin Ryan, who's a jockey I have a great time for. Gavin Ryan rode her in her first couple of starts. She won both. Since then, the horse has been ridden by Frankie Dettori, Oisin Murphy, Tom Marquand, and Ryan Moore. So she's had no lack of help from the saddle. But you say she's a flag bearer for Donncha, like. She's an amazing flag bearer for Caravaggio, who off the top of my head, hasn't had a horse within an ass's roar of this one's ability. And Caravaggio, my mind, is now standing in Japan. So he would have sort of been considered, he'd kind of done his work over here, that he hadn't really lived up to his billing as a stallion. 10 of Risen would have been a good horse as well. But she's, he said after the Guineas that he didn't feel that she'd gotten the respect she deserved. She's certainly getting it now, and it's an incredible run of form for Donncha. He's a very, very likable guy. He's kind of quite different to Joseph, I think, in the sense of they're different characters, extremely mannerly in interviews, and really well brought up. But I don't think Joseph's operation is mind blowing. I don't know how he manages it. Like the numbers are off the charts, and you have to have trainers will tell you it's hard to get staff. Like, imagine how difficult it is for Joseph to get good staff, and somehow he does it. But I'd say Donncha's happier with a smaller operation. He's an outstanding young man.
Yeah, it's very unusual, really, for someone to come into the game at such a young age like Joseph and to build it up so quickly into that numbers. Like, you have Willie Mullins talking about when he came into it first, he was hoping he might eventually get to 70 horses. That was his goal in life, was to train 70 horses. Now he trains about 300. Gordon Elliott the same, but they all start off small and build it up gradually over a number of years. Aidan himself would have done something similar, I'd imagine, but Joseph just seems to have gone straight in at the top with any amount of horse, and he's had huge success. Like, he's had massive winners, including Melbourne Cups and all the rest of it at this stage. But you would wonder how it's going at the moment, because they are struggling just a little bit in comparison to his younger brother. Anyway, moving on to one other thing I wanted to have a chat about. I wrote about it in the blog today. I wouldn't go as far as say it's tongue in cheek, but it's a little bit just saying we should look at this. Is amateur jockeys, should they be paid? And the question is, Johnny, are they already being paid?
Actually, they are. Like, I mean, you make a good point in the blog that little infringements are picked up upon by the authorities, but like, this is, I mean, there's an elephant in the room in Gaelic games, and managers getting paid, and often getting well paid. And this is a kind of a comparison here where, like, managers shouldn't be paid in Gaelic games, but they absolutely are, and there's a blind eye turned to it. And it's kind of the same here. Like, I'm sure, as you say, like, amateurs riding all over the country all year round and not getting paid, it doesn't add up if they've no other job. And like, to be honest, like, it's not something I've necessarily a strong opinion on, but your blog makes perfect sense, and it's the authorities turn a blind eye. But I guess it's easy to turn the other way when I remember owning horses and bunging the jockey a few quid after the race, particularly an amateur. And I say the amateurs do all right out of life. But it's just a blind eye is turned. It's a bit, as you say, it's a bit like managers in Gaelic games.
Yeah. How does it work in your yard, Emma? The amateurs, they get a few quid, did they?
Sure. I mean, you can't expect these lads to do it for free. Like, it's kind of, I suppose, like, there's arguments kind of all over. Your blog was very interesting now, in fairness, and like, it's kind of something that's coming up in the GA kind of more and more again. Should those lads be paid, and they get expenses and stuff, but like, technically the amateur jockeys get nothing technically. Which, it's kind of I suppose, like, in this day and age, like, a lot of the lads riding amateur, they're really professional. They probably, weight is probably the only thing stopping them, or unless there's a couple other reasons, maybe lads might prefer riding in point to points and stuff. But I think weight, for the vast majority, like, some of those top amateurs are as good as any of the best professionals. And maybe pay, like, I'm not sure what the whole technicalities around the amateur status is, but like, it just makes more sense to pay them, because if you're booking a jockey there to ride in a handicap chase in Killarney, let's say, this week, like, you have to pay the riding fee. It goes to the Injured Jockeys Fund, obviously a good cause, but then you have to give the jockey something as well, so you're kind of paying double, which is kind of penalising So maybe it might even lead to more rides for these lads riding amateurs, and top weights and handicaps and stuff like that. Whereas now it's kind of a double cost really, unless maybe they're working in the yard, maybe they mightn't get anything then. But yeah, I suppose it's kind of racing turning a blind eye to it. All right, I'm not sure if it's something that they're ever really going to change, but probably an old system that look, I don't. The amateurs probably do fairly well. Like the good amateurs, I'm sure they make plenty of money. But yeah, it's probably an outdated system, you'd have to say.
Yeah, and even just the racing in general, it depends on amateur riders. That's what it does, because there's so many amateur races in the calendar, and some of them are very big races. We're going to see in Galway later at the end of the month. You've got the big amateur handicap on the first night, and that's a huge betting race, one of the biggest betting races of the week in Galway. So same in Punchestown, there's whatever there is, 11 or 12 races in Punchestown that are also amateur races at the festival. So a huge amount of that is just depending on amateur people to not be paid. And as I say, just even the costs, as you'd know, Johnny, from traveling up and down the country going to racing, costs a lot of money, whether how you're getting there with lifts and driving and petrol and all the rest of it. And there's overnight expenses in places and everything else. So to expect these people to do this for nothing, you couldn't expect that realistically in a professional sport. And then on top of that, they're probably not doing it for nothing, is the other side, which is the blind eye that's turned to it. Anyway, moving on to Killarney itself, which starts today. It's on for the next 4 days. Have we a tip for this? Johnny, have you looked at it?
I have. It's a meeting I'd love to get on racing TV. Like the racing, I do the meetings generally where they're lower kind of. I get the odd Killarney, but it's more if somebody else isn't working that day or something. I've never actually gotten working Killarney 3 days in a row. I'd love that. Although the problem would be just not having too much fun in Killarney. I love Kerry. It's a great part of the world. I love working down there, the odd chance I get. Just a couple of things. Aidan O'Brien has had, it's 20 runners since Aidan O'Brien had an odds-on shot, which is quite mad, just looking up this morning. And he's used 14 different riders in Ireland this season. Wayne Lorden is on 20 from 82 in Ireland. Ryan Moore, 31 from 85. He's used 14 different jockeys. And I know Declan McDonough, who's forging a very nice freelance career at the moment himself, and Jack Cleary riding in the first, and that's on Monday. So it's interesting to see Aidan. He's using a lot of riders at the moment. But we spoke about a young trainer in Donal Bryan earlier, but there's an even younger trainer in Ireland, and that is young Dan McLaughlin, who I don't know if you saw the interview he gave to Gary O'Brien after he won his first race was at Naas, and I actually interviewed him subsequently because he's the winner in Mallow, and he's just such a likable guy, big smile on his face. I think he's only 21 or something, might even be younger, but he trains Solar Breeze. I think it's very interesting in the 7:15 on Tuesday. And I know you like that card as well, Vinny, but it's a cracking track, Killarney. It's quite a tricky track. And she'll lead a smallest looking run the way she's ridden. But the other thing I want to mention, Ketton Kennedy claiming 7. I like to latch onto a young rider who's claiming. He's my go-to £7 claimer at the moment if I like to have a bet. And I think there's a lot of positives about the horse, albeit in a good race.
Yeah. Keaton Kennedy, now he really is a hot property at the moment. I see in the race I'm going to pick one is the 7:45 on Tuesday in Killarney, a horse called Samui, and he rides the top one for Jessica Harrington, that Taipan. But anyway, this Samui, Declan McDonough rides this. He's won in the horse before. It's an ex-hurdler. It's been running very well on the flat. It's had 3 runs already on the flat. The 2 recent ones are one in Down Royal over 1.25 miles. Then it stepped up to 1.5 miles in an amateur riders race in Bellewstown recently. And I think this is a very good run. It split 2 decent horses, Eagle's Way rated 97 and Enniskerry rated 98. And this horse gets a handicap rating of 89, which is the guts of £10 below the pair of them. I can't understand why it's got such a good initial rating for a handicap. And I think with the fact that Taipan, and there's also one of Willie Mullins's that hasn't run for a long time either, 2 of them might lack a run. With Declan McDonough in the saddle, stepping up in trip, 2 miles, an extended 2 miles. It is 2 miles and nearly a furlong. I think Samui could be a good bet on Tuesday evening. Emma, what did you make of Killarney?
Yeah, it's always a great meeting. It's probably one of my favourite towns in Ireland, is that it's always great for a night out. But yeah, the Killarney races, if anyone hasn't been, it's definitely the most scenic course in Ireland, and probably up there one of the best in the world. And it's always great crack down there as well. But so I was kind of talking about Joseph O'Brien earlier. he's normally one to follow at Killarney. In fairness, I think last year he had a 40% strike rate at the track, and the year before 43%. So he'll have a fair few runners this week, but he normally fires them pretty well at the Killarney Festival anyway. So yeah, but one who was in my tracker to follow now. It's not till later on in the week, so still waiting for declarations. But Belltown Lake for Eugene O'Sullivan on Thursday. It's in the ladies' bumper, so you'd imagine he'll have the assistance of Maxine, which is always a plus in these lady rider races. He's a horse he's been in the tracker for a while. I haven't seen him since he won point to point in Kildallery February of last year. But he looked a fine horse that day. I saw the race, and there's a few horses in behind him from the point to point that day had gone on to pretty decent careers in England. There's a few winners came out of the race. I think he was declared to run once last year, but didn't make it. So you'd assume he's had issues. Look, I'd imagine he's going to be a massive price if he shows up there. Willie Mullins has won in there with a couple of good runs. Look, he's maybe one to watch, but if he was a very big price, I might have something each way on him. But he looked a nice horse when he won his point to point, and I saw him at Eugene's when we did a stable tour there last year as well. He looked like a cracker, and they thought a fair bit about him then as well. So he's obviously had issues, but I think he could run a nice race if he shows up there.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing him on declarations for Thursday. Anyway, that's it from us. So make sure to gamble responsibly, and do subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, so you'll find out about all the shows when they're published on our YouTube channel. And Emma will have another one Friday looking ahead to the big weekends racing in the UK, particularly this weekend as well. So thanks for everything, guys, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.
Play at Novabet.